Hi Maya, this video is to just go over what you may have missed during our class time, our class Zoom, but you can always just pause this video and then work on the question yourself. This questions or the work that we have here has the work on it, but hopefully you can use the tool and the work that I have and the work that you can do when you see this question to just have some more practice. So this first question is comparing 3 and 1/6 to 3 and 4/6. And this is kind of a review question because what we see is that they have the same denominator. So we don't have to take any extra steps in comparing them because we're able to just compare the 4/6 and the 3/6, or the 1/6. So I see that 4/6 is going to be greater than 1/6 because 4/6 is closer to our whole number of 6/6. So this review question knows and shares that 3 and 4/6 is going to be greater than 3 and 1/6. The next question we went over comparing is 3 and 2/6 with 3 and 6/8. So unlike the previous question we just did, we have a different denominator. And as always, you can pause this video to write this down and work on it your own, but I'm going to walk you through the steps. So for this question, since they have the same whole numbers, we know that we are just going to be comparing the 2/6 and the 3/8 because that will tell us which one has the greater value. So what tool we used to do that was the halfway mark. We first started by looking at 2 6s. So we broke apart our number line into 6 parts because that is our denominator or the population for this first fraction. I know that half of 6 is going to be 3. So I put a red line right on the 3. However, our fraction 2/6 falls right here. So I put a blue dot on the 2 line. And I see that 2/6 is going to be less than 3/6, which means it's below the halfway mark. The 6/8 we then wrote on a number line, and I broke apart this number line into 8 pieces because our population is 8. I know that 4 is going to be half of 8, so I put a red dotted line right here, and I see that 6/8 is our fraction, so I put a 6 on a dot on the 6/8 part. In comparing 6/8 with 4/8, I know that 6/8 is above that halfway mark. So if it's above a halfway mark, it's going to be closer to the next whole number, which means it has larger value. So by taking the tools we used with this halfway mark, I saw that 3 and 6/8 is going to be greater than 3 and 2/8, or 2 6s. So the next 2 questions we went over have the same pattern. That's why they're on the same piece of paper. But the first one is 18 6s compared with 4 1/2. So what we had to do was we first had to compose that 18 6s to a whole number. In composing, we were able to see that 6 can go into 18 exactly 3 times. So if it's exactly 3 times, we know we're just going to have a whole number. 6 times 3 equals 18, so we were able to check that work and write our composed number of 3. Now that we have the composed 2 numbers, we were able to compare the whole number of 3 with the mixed number 4 1/2. And in doing so, we didn't have to write this on a number line because we were able to just compare the 2 whole numbers 3 and 4. We know that 3 is less than 4, so that means 4 1/2 is going to be greater than 18 6s. The next question we went over was similar, and we had to compose 12 6s, and we still compared it with 4 1/2. So we saw that 12 6s is the same as writing the whole number 2. And again, we know that we could just compare the 2 whole numbers because they're different. So really this half doesn't even matter in this comparison because 4 is always going to be greater than 2. So I know that 4 1/2 is going to be greater than 12 6s. So the next 2 fractions we compared was 43 7ths with 3 and 1/6. So what we saw was that 43 7ths is going to have a remainder because 7 can't directly go into 43. So when composing, we know that 7 can go into 43 6 times. and that equals the fraction 42/7. When we take away 42 from 43, we were left with 1/7. So now we were able to compose these two fractions to make our mixed number. 42/7 is the same as writing 6 wholes because 7 goes into 42 exactly 6 times. We are left over with the remainder of 1/7, making our mixed number 6 1/7. So now we were able to compare 6 1/7 with 3 1/6. In doing so, all we had to compare was the whole numbers because they're different. So I know that 6 is always going to be above 3 no matter what the fraction is. So 6 1/7 is going to be greater than 3 1/6. This next question we went over used the halfway mark again because we have the same whole numbers. 3 and 3 are the same whole numbers, so what we have to compare here is the 2/4 with the 7/10. We split this first number line into fourths, and we know that if we cut 4 in half, we're going to receive 2. So we put our halfway mark on 2. We know that the fraction we were given is 2 as well, so we had to put our dot on the 2. So we labeled that this fraction is going to be on the halfway mark. For 10, we broke apart this number line into tenths, and then we cut it in half to see what our halfway mark would be. We know that half of 10 is going to be 5, so we drew that dotted line on the 5 mark. The fraction we received was 7/10, so we put a big red dot on the 7/10. We know that 7/10 is above our halfway mark of 5/10, so we labeled this above. Since this fraction took up more space on the number line, meaning it was closer to the 4, we were able to see that 3 7/10 is going to be greater than 3 2/4. The last question I want to go over with you is comparing this fraction, 2 47/100 with 2 26/50. So for this one, although they do have the same whole numbers and different denominators, we do not have to make it or compose it on a number line. We do not have to draw it on a number line because breaking up a number line into 100ths or 50ths would just be too much work and too confusing. So instead, we decided to use our previous knowledge to see what would half of 100 be. We know that half of 100 is going to be 50, so we wrote the fraction here and we compared it with the fraction we were given, 47. We see that 47/100 is less than 50/100, so it's going to be below the halfway mark. We did the same thing here with our fraction 26/50. We broke apart our denominator in half, and we saw that half of 50 is 25/50. The fraction we received was 26/50. So we know that 26/50 is going to be above 25/50, meaning it's above the halfway mark. So we see, using our halfway mark technique and not drawing it on a number line necessarily, that 2 26/50 is going to be greater than 2 47/100. For some of these, I know there's a lot of techniques that you can use to find greater than or less than or equal to statements. And I hope that this review, I know it has the work on it, but I hope that you're able to continue to work on it during our little Easter break. And I look forward to seeing you in our Zoom call next week. Bye, Maya.